topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Alise Cortez.
Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program, which has been brought to you with passion and pride since February of 2015. Thanks for tuning in this week. Great to have you. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. If we've not met before and you don't know me, I'm a workforce advisor, organizational psychologist, management consultant, logotherapist, speaker, and author. My team and I at Gusto Now help companies enliven and fortify their operations by building a dynamic, high-performance culture, inspirational leadership, and nurturing managers activated by meaning and purpose. Many organizations are not aware of how critical it is to invest in developing their leaders and managers, not just for their own effectiveness, but also to avoid burnout and keep them fulfilled. And did you know that inspired employees outperform their satisfied peers by a factor of 2.25 to 1? In other words, inspiration is good for the bottom line. You can learn more about how we can work together at gusto-now.com or my personal site, alisecortez.com. Getting into today's program, we have with us today Carlos Hoyos. He's a senior global C-level executive coach, Forbes Coaches Council member, business advisor, podcast host, and author, among many other things. He and I met in the Forbes Coaches Council. That's how we know each other. He comes to us today from Campinas in the state of São Paulo, Brazil. Carlos, a hearty welcome to Working on Purpose. Bem-vindo a Working on Purpose.
Wow, thank you very much. Bilingual and everything. Such a privilege to be here. It was one of the great gifts to be in the Forbes Coaches Council is to know amazing people such as yourself. So I'm here to serve. Thanks for being on the show.
Absolutely, Carlos. And I appreciate that the council it attracts people from all over the world, which is part of the reason that I wanted to be involved in it as well. And I want to celebrate that you work, do your podcast, write books, speak in English, Portuguese, and Spanish, and your websites are in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. I just think that's fantastic. Those are the languages that I traffic in as well. Not as strongly as you, of course, but having lived in Brazil, that's, of course, where I got my love for Portuguese.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome. So today, listeners and viewers, what we're talking about is Carlos's ideas around what he calls self-leadership. We're going to talk a good bit about that to help you understand that and enroll you in that concept, and then really how it relates to how you can build and transform culture. So that's the focus of today's conversation. And I wanted to start with what each of us tend to find when we open a conversation. Somebody calls us and they have a problem in their business they're trying to solve, and we have a conversation. And almost every time when you walk into a conversation, you hear some similar refrains. So let's talk about the 4 questions that you tend to pause and ask people who think they want to work with you and who think that you can help them. What are those questions?
Excellent. I like how we start with this, because that's how we start most of the conversations in businesses. And I ask these 4 questions, not only with executive coaching programs, but also with advisory, because people typically want the change, but they do not want to become responsible for the change. And after hitting my head against the wall so many times and getting frustrated, there has to be a way to filter a little bit better this process, right? So I came up with those questions. I probably didn't create any of this. I just, learned and started accumulating. And when I realized things were not really going to be effective, I want to make sure that we're stumbling on this. So the first question is, and I ask people in general, do you believe that in order for you to get the results that you're looking for in your business, in your company or division, you actually need to change? And that gives me the perception that the person has self-awareness or maturity to understand that the person is part of the change. She needs to change first. So typically people say, yeah, of course I need to change, right? So the second question is, do you believe that you actually can change? And amazingly, some people get stuck on, well, I'm kind of too old for that, and I cannot change. So I expect other people will receive me or will just adapt. That's not very common, but every now and then it happens. And then, a little bit of neuroscience, neuroplasticity, and neurogenesis, and the person, wow, yeah, and actually I've been changing over the years. So that's uncommon, but sometimes it still happens. Third question is, well, are you open to be part of this change in this process? And that is when I start to really to dividing people that are interesting to work with, and it's going to be really a hard time to work. And I actually had cases as well that people that, no, I'm not willing to change. I don't want to say so. So whenever I get a no, if I'm not able to influence the person, but typically the third question, the person's really stuck. I say, I can't help you. I'm sorry, I cannot help you because you agree with me already that you need to change to get the result that you can change, but you're not conscious that, or you're not aware that you're open for the change. And the fourth question is just like, make it or break it. Are you committed to the process of getting results? And that will include you to change until you get a result, right? Because the context that we are on, which is consequence of who we are or how we impact the environment. And I learned this in troublesome ways in the past. So I understood that if I really want to get some change, I have to be committed to the glory and the painful parts of the process, the ups and downs of going up to the mountain. And sometimes I hate the process. So if I'm not really committed to the process, I'm not going to get the result. So I expect the same thing from my clients. And that time, depending on the client, if I see some more resistant to this, it's just like, and self-pilots, it's just like, yeah. I say, no, but you understand this is going to be hard. You understand sometimes you're going to love me and sometimes you're going to hate me. I always say, I do this with, my heart full of love because I want the best for you and your company. But sometimes you might not want to hear what I have to say. So unless you're fully committed to this process, I don't want to play with this. I don't want to be part of this because I want people that are fully engaged on this. So these are my, four quick questions that once I get, all green lights and people really aware of this, they understand the game and they are ready, pre-committed to the process.
Great way to kick things off, Carlos. Now let's go back to question 3 because I think it'll be important for our listeners and viewers to maybe self-identify here what they might be thinking about, even if they give a yes answer to, are you open to change? Well, I'm going to seed a couple, and then I would love for you to fill in some. I can imagine that when you ask people, are you open to change, and the answer is no, then part of what could be in that is I could imagine, and I do hear leaders say, this is not my problem. It's what happens is we have to get these people motivated to work. We've got to change their mindsets about how they're relating to work and how it is they think work should be done around here. That's the problem. And so they're identifying outside of themselves and attributing what needs to be changed to something outside of themselves. What else do you hear when people are saying they're not really open to change?
This is pretty much it. But after a while, you see what people say, but you realize when people are not really meaning that. Right. So this is like the quick questions on the top on the surface, but some of those questions and answers, they derive another set of discussions because people say, well, I'm eager to change, but my team has to change first, or it's like conditional change. And the whole thing is just like, okay, so what's your role in this organization? Are you going to be the driving force of this, or you're just, I don't necessarily use this word. You're like a victim or a martyr of what happens to you. In other words, you're a cause or the effect of what's going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some examples that I like to use is just, it's what's your real impact on people? Perhaps people are not changing because they don't know how to change, or perhaps people are afraid of changing, or perhaps don't really know what to expect from you. So, for example, if I come here not prepared, like in a t-shirt, or just, oh my gosh, we have, interview now, and I'm going to improvise things, or I'm not really 100% present here with you, you're going to notice this. So my impact is really negative. And if I continue to do this, I'm going to be having a horrible reputation. So it really depends on how the person answers this and the convictions on this that we can explore on this. And again, it doesn't take a lot of time to people are really open to this, not really curious about changing, that you realize, I definitely need to change. I'm open to change. I have changed in the past. I see that now. Right. For example, if I have a bad relationship, like at my home, I have to do something so they react back in a different way. So you have a positive impact, they're going to react back. Not sure I answer your question, but these are some reflections that I have in this point.
Yeah, that really helps. I think it helps our listeners and viewers kind of get into the mental state of what this conversation is really about and connect with it. I want to say two other things to that really quick, Carlos. One other thing that I also think that we hear when we're working with leaders who are wanting different results for their business is they say, well, this change isn't really about me. The problem is this last younger generation, they just don't want to work. The generational throw under the bus is all over the place. Now there are at least 5 generations in the workplace now, and they all have different motivations, different values for working, different desires for where they are in life, etc. And so part of the opportunity, of course, as we know, as leaders, is to be able to find a way to activate that and meet them where they are, to be able to inspire them to perform at their best. And so I think it's important that we call that one out, because I know you have to hear it as much as I do, the generational complaint about why things really aren't changing or working around here. Yeah, that's the first thing. The second thing I was going to say about what you just said that I love about our work, and I know you have to get this as well, is because our work requires working intimately with our leaders, and we are getting deep into their lives and their mindsets and how they're thinking about themselves, how they're relating to other people. One of the most cherished aspects for me, and it doesn't happen a ton of the time, is when I get the call or the email from the spouse saying, whatever you're doing, thank you, because it's coming home with him or her as well. Right?
Very good.
Okay, well, let's go on to this next bit here. I really, listeners and viewers, Carlos has many articles published on Forbes Coaches Council. I highly recommend you check them out. One of the other that I checked out there that I thought was really interesting, you've got an article on the 3 axes that guide transformation. And of course, one of those is self-leadership, which we're talking about and will continue to talk about in different ways here as we go. Leadership and governance. If you could introduce each of those 3, we'll talk more about them after our first break, but if you could at least cue up those 3 axes to guide transformation for us.
Sure. The basis for this is that most effective executives, leaders, business owners, they're multidimensional. They don't have like the proverbial, I have a hammer, so everything is a nail. And they understand there are different things that they have to operate on. So I initially worked with, leadership and management, right? So in a very simple terms, leadership is connecting with the heart, the vision with other people, right? And management's getting to the numbers. But management, it's not enough when you consider a broader spectrum. And so that's why I talk about governance. And I know we're going to talk about this, but governance is just a set of principles, rules, structure, organisms, and processes that provide longevity for the business, adds value, and protect the business owners and all the stakeholders. So includes management and includes a lot of other things. And there's some systematics on this. Now, self-leadership became really apparent to me when I realized that it doesn't really matter the context that people are on, the technology, um, the processes, all the certifications. This all comes down to ability of the person to self-lead, to self-guide, and to change. And you can replace self-leadership as self-mastery. Um, so has been a perpetual process in my head, and of course writing and improving this, understand, okay, at a given point, what is the key parameter that needs to be changed now, or what is the X that we need to put effort on. In other words, other things will automatically derive from that. And typically self-leadership is the starting point. That's why I have, put so much effort on working on this, writing a books on self-leadership, writing lots of articles on this. And essentially, once the person knows where she or he wants to get and has a clear vision, purpose, working on purpose, everything else you just derive from that. Hopefully that was a good
Absolutely.
starting
Thank you,
point.
Carlos. That's a perfect way to really situate more of the breadth of the work that you do and what we're going to talk about. We'll grab our first break. I'm Alise Cortez, your host. We've been on here with Carlos Hoyos. He is a senior global C-level business and executive coach and a Forbes Coaches Council member. We have been talking a bit about the notion of the importance of change and transformation and starting to talk about self-leadership. After the break, we're going to delve more deeply into self-leadership. We'll be right back.
Dr. Alise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Alise to speak to your organization, please visit her at alisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Alise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Alise, send an email to Alise, A-L-I-S-E, at alisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. So I'm dedicated to helping create a world where organizations thrive because their people thrive. They're led by inspirational leaders that help them find and contribute their greatness, and we do business in a way that betters the world. I keep researching and writing my own books. So one of the latest came out. It's called The Great Revitalization, How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business. And I wrote it to help leaders understand the nature of today's workplace. They're very diverse and they're very discerning. What do they want and need from work in order to give their best and want to stay? And then I provide 22 best practices to equip you to provide it for them in your leadership and your culture. You can find my books on Amazon or my personal site, alisecortez.com. If you are just now joining us, my guest is Carlos Hoyos. He is a senior level, global level executive coach. He is based in Brazil and he does business around the world. So let's peel back more on this notion of self-leadership. There's so many layers that we could get to here. And before we do that, I want to situate something that you talk about that I think is critical. And it's something that unfortunately all of us fall prey to. And it's this idea of when we confuse the symptom with the root. And so when we're talking we're talking about maybe a team issue, or the leader is saying, the teams aren't performing, they're not innovating, or they're not working together, they're complaining all the time, whatever it is. And what you say is what appears to be a performance issue is actually a leadership blind spot.
Yeah, pretty much. That's essentially what I found in 25 years plus as a leader in multi-geographies, language teams, and 12 years of practice as executive coach. You just have to bring a mirror and say, this is where you have to start working on. And once you start working on it, everything else is a consequence.
Do you have an example of like, so that our listeners and viewers can relate to that idea of, let's say they're coming to you and they're maybe
Yeah.
they're exasperated, and what is that blind spot you were able to help them see?
I don't think I have a single client that we haven't worked directly, indirectly, consciously or unconsciously on their self-leadership. But the things that when you start talking, you just remember it was the founder of a company, and it was like a mid-sized company. They were exporting, they're growing, they're booming, and they want to get to the next level. The thing is, yeah, we need to get to the next level. We need to update the team and all that stuff. And very simple question, say, okay, where do you see yourself in 3 to 5 years? And it's striking because most of people don't have that sort of vision. And whenever we think about leadership, we think about leading others. How am I able to lead others if I don't exude the confidence, the gravity that I know where I'm going to? And that was the key reason why this business owner, executive, founder, multimillionaire couldn't let go from 3 roles he was holding in his current position at that time. And then he realized if you don't have a clear vision of what you are going to do in a few years, you are stuck in your past identity. You keep on repeating yourself in this identity. And that to me was just surprising. It was so obvious to me, but when it became obvious to him, things started to change.
Mm-hmm. So powerful. It's such a privilege, isn't it, Carlos, to be able to do this kind of very intimate work with people, and it does require them to trust us and to be vulnerable with us, and I really appreciate that. And then getting to see the results when they do start to, the big ahas go off, and then they start to change their behavior, the way they're relating to their people, and they get different results. It's just the most rewarding thing. And I, to that end, really appreciate how crisply you talk in your articles and in your work. You have a list here of 10 pillars of self-leadership, and you also have 5 pillars of self-governance. I want to talk about both. Which one makes the most sense to talk about first?
I think we can talk about governance. I think it's going to be quicker.
Okay. Okay.
I didn't create these five principles of governance. I just once I got my certification as a board member and started working at the board level and training future board members at the mindset level. And right now, most of my work is prepare mid-sized companies to have a board, right? Structured board. So I work with governance. And what I realized, and I do a lot of reflection on this, I like to get a concept that is really good in one area and start thinking, how can I apply this to many other areas? So when I think about these pillars of governance, these are also pillars of self-governance or self-leadership. And essentially they are sustainability or longevity. You're actually thinking in the long term. So the decisions should not be done strictly for the short term. I mean, of course, if somebody is hurt, you need to take this person to the emergency room. But you can patch this person to survive the next few minutes or fix this person for life, right? So essentially, you just always have this long-term vision. And it's amazing. If you just apply that and every single day with a business owner and an executive, they start to change because you realize that they're so reactive. I mean, this is basic neuroscience, and but when I say neuroscience, seems a very complicated thing. But fear accelerates people,
Yeah.
and when people are accelerated, they have cortisol. The most effective people, leaders, they they are not rushing. They are not running for 1,000 different things. They're just precise. They prioritize. They understand what really is the thing that moves the needle, and that is long-term thinking, right? So the second thing is equity, and in equity is it's being just at the proper level. It's sort of a fairness, but it's not treating everybody equals, because you cannot treat the CEO, or you cannot reward the CEO the same way you were going to reward a first line manager. It's different responsibilities. But when you work with equity, people will have different responsibilities. They will have different charges, different levels of pressure, and of course, different rewards. So when you think about a business, you think about all the possible stakeholders. You definitely have to work properly in a just way, in an equitable way, if that is a word, with all different stakeholders. And again, if you only do that, and you start thinking how I'm treating my significant other, how I'm treating my son, my daughter, different ages, right? One is 21, the other 7. How I treat my employees at home, how I treat my subordinates in company, and you're going to start to understand that you're not going to give the same amount of time to everyone. And when you bring this to work, not only home, you actually start changing not only the direct relationship, but this encompasses the entire culture of the company. The third quality of this, and this, by the way, I didn't mention this, but this comes from the Instituto Brasileiro de Governança Corporativa. It's Brazilian Governance Institute, right? Something like that in free translation. So we're using them, right? So the third thing is transparency. It's just that it's related with compliance, but if we do things, if we tell people what to do, but we don't explain them why, what's going on, the relevance of that, our communication is really shallow. Yeah. And people start to doubt you. And again, just be transparent. You know, you don't know, it's okay. And if you cannot tell people because it's confidential, just it's a needed to know basis. I would love to tell you what's going on. You're probably going to know in a few weeks, but right now it's classified. And be transparent about the things that cannot be transparent. And people will start trusting you a lot more when you do that. And again, you can do this in a personal life, in a professional life, in a business life, for management and governing a business. That's vital. The fourth one is integrity, right? Do the right thing, be honest. I mean, it seems simple, but if you take this home, you're going to realize that most people are not at 100% integrity level. They do not fulfill all their arrangements or their agreements. They don't keep the word. They don't park in the right place. When people are not watching, they're not actually being 100%, complete people with individual integrity. And so people realize that their results are a direct consequence of their integrity with themselves, with their family, with their society and the company. They start to elevate their performance. And I have, like 10 or 20 questions for every single one of those. And I use every now and then with the business owners. And excuse me, they realize that, well, I don't think we have as much governance as we thought we had. Because that's how you bring abstraction to real life. The hard data is just how really honest you're being with your business partners, how really transparent, how you're treating them all fairly and square, right? And you're focusing on long term. And finally, the fifth one is accountability. And accountability is 360 degrees. I make myself accountable. I make other people accountable. You promised you were going to do this. What happened? And we don't have to be nasty. I mean, if we have this in the playing field and we define these are the pillars that we're going to work from now on, you're super free to ask me and to demand from me accountability. Why I'm not delivering on what I promised. So essentially, this is the 5 concept that I use in governance.
I want to comment on the integrity principle or pillar there, Carlos, because I see this happen in several leaders that I've been working with. I have one in particular I'm working with right now where the integrity piece is a problem for him. And he doesn't really know it just yet. This has just been surfaced. And what I've come to understand in talking to his team members is part of what's happening there is he's not following through with what he says he's going to do. And part of what I believe is under that is he has the best intentions. He does mean to follow through. But I believe, and what we'll be working on is he doesn't have a system to capture what he says he's going to do for people. So he goes crazy fast through his busy day, and he has all these conversations, and there are these exchanges, and people are hanging on his words because he's the big boss. And he says he's going to do X or Y. And they're like, that's great. I mean, that would really make a big difference. But then he doesn't do it. Now there's this awkwardness to come back and say, hey, you said you were going to do this, which is tough. So part of what we'll be working on is helping him create a system where he can capture that in some way so that he has something to reference at the end of the day, the end of the week, or whatever, and be able to fulfill on. Very simple, but this is one I've seen this happen over and over and trip up leaders on the integrity front.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's essentially governance, right? You do what you promise.
Right.
You keep track. You have processes.
Right.
You have roles. You have
Right.
project management. You have dates. You have SMART goals. You have, plans, action plans. Otherwise, it becomes just like communication ware. It's just
Right.
like,
Right. And so now, of course, then let me just play the rest of that out, ladies and gentlemen. So now imagine what that does for the level of trust in the organization. People don't trust this leader. They like him, they appreciate him, but they don't trust him. And so now you've got a problem with how things are getting trafficked in the organization, how they're getting communicated, who's expected to do what. So the governance, I like how you just made that really crisp, Carlos. The self-governance is missing there. Okay, let's grab our last break. We've been on air with Carlos Hoyos. He is a senior executive C-suite leader and coach. He does business around the world. He's based in Brazil, but does business around the world. He speaks English, Portuguese, and Spanish well. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. We've been talking about the importance and some of the elements of self-leadership. After the break, we're going to talk a bit more about the pillars of self-leadership and then start talking about how self-leadership impacts and can influence cultural change and transformation. We'll be right back.
Dr. Alise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Alise to speak to your organization, please visit her at alisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Alise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Alise, send an email to Alise, A-L-I-S-E, at alisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Alise Cortez. As you know by now, this program is dedicated to empowering and inspiring you along your journey to realize more of your potential. If you want to learn more about how we can work together and something about the Gusto Now Academy for leaders and individuals on various journeys alike, whether it's manager, leader, or C-suite or others, you can go to gusto-now.com and make your way to the training tab and you will find the Academy information. We would love to have you join us. If you are just joining the program today, with us today is Carlos Hoyos. He is a senior C-level executive coach. He and I are both Forbes Coaches Council members, and we're talking today about self-leadership and cultural transformation and change. So now we have covered those 5 pillars of self-governance, Carlos. I would love to have you share at least a few of the 10 pillars of self-leadership. We may not need to go into all of them, but if you have them at the ready, then as many as you can cover, I think that would help our listeners and viewers.
Sure. I'll give you the brief overview of this, and then we can delve in some of them.
Awesome.
If it makes sense. The history behind this, which is I wanted to have clarity in any given time or moment what I needed to do to make progress towards my goals, or to have progress, or to feel better, and how I teach clients and students on mentoring programs and training programs. What is the next step, right? And there's no rocket science on this. Perhaps one or two we might strike as different, but this is just, and my experience of what makes work for me and for my clients. It's just a method, right? So perhaps not only pillars or steps. The first thing is to be intentional, and then you can get the purpose, the vision, goal, and why you want that. What's your intention when you get into a meeting, when you sit to play with the kids, when you start a new professional relationship? It's having the vision clarity. Second, it's informational. It's get information to support you going towards your goals or your vision, your purpose. Because a lot of people have an idea and start working on it without checking information, background. And you can get as heavy as you want. You can, get a coach, get trained, videos, podcasts, get information that will expand your mind to support you to get where you want to go. And the third, it's to be intelligent, but of course not in the position of being dumb, but it's strategically intelligent. It's create a plan. So I know what I want, why I want it. I gather information and I create a plan. Be intelligent about it, create a plan, right? Fourth is become intuitive on this. Sleep on it. Wait a little bit on this. Check if there's some misalignment internally. And there's a lot of science on this. Heart Math Institute, a lot of this, and how expand intuition, all that stuff. The gut feeling. Something doesn't smell right on this. I mean, just don't go against your intuition. And I can tell you from my personal experience, every single time that I ignored these internal red flags, I got in trouble. Every single one.
Yeah, me too. 100%.
And sometimes the intuition and the way I pray and meditate, I do, breath work. And what it comes is just like new ideas to validate my plan, to improve my plan, or remove things from the plan. So I use that a lot. Sometimes just go to sleep with an intention, and I dream about that thing, or I wake up with an answer. So I use this a lot, and there's a lot of science now on this. The fifth one is being impeccable. It means that you got a plan, you have purpose, you put energy on this, execute the best way that you can. Number 6 is implacable. It's whenever you find something that's a problematic thing, something is not right, something is a bad habit or whatever, get rid of it. Right? It's anything that's a roadblock, get rid of it. Of course, be honest, be with high values in this, but get rid of anything that is blocking you, or if it's an organization, anything that should not be there in the culture, you have to be implacable, ruthless. Just get rid of that. Not with the person, always love the human being, be compassionate about it, but the mistakes that cannot be repeated doesn't make sense. Yeah. Number 7 is it's unshakable. That's the only in English that is, it doesn't start with an I, because the idea of the I is like pillars, columns. And in Portuguese, it's like inabalável. It means that you're unshakable. And that means that having the emotional intelligence to go through all the highs and lows of that journey. Then the way you talk about values is being uncorruptible. Being honest, ethical, I'd say that, in general, that's easy enough to do. And the major problem here is that people don't know their value system. Yeah. They don't have the criteria. What is the most important thing here? And a lot of people are successful. They get burnout, and they don't know what they're doing and why they're doing it anymore. Right? So being uncorruptible it really requires being intentional about what you want. And by the way, those things, bring force. If you realize that something is broken, you need to fix it. Being implacable, you get, okay, so what's my intention? I need to fix this. I need to get more information. So you're never end this. You can have multiple things spawn in parallel on this. Then the 9th one is it's being inspirational. So major difference between unshakable is just like if you're operating this level, things will bring you down. You have to go back to this level. To become inspirational to others and for yourself first, you have to go to the next level. Just like how you get energy, how you get emotion. I mean, you talked about before the value, the ROI, return on investment on inspiration, right? And motivation. It's how you get to the next level. Because up to here, I actually delivered. But now I need like a supercharging list. Otherwise, I won't be able to deliver in the next level. I don't even know how to do that. So that's the idea of becoming an inspirational person. And these are self-leadership. You start with yourself, and after you work with yourself, you work with others, right? And finally, it's, we're not going to change overnight. That's going to take time. And that's being incremental. So intentional, informational, intelligent, strategically speaking, intuitive, impeccable, implacable, unshakable, uncorruptible, inspirational, and incremental.
Sounds simple enough.
It's hard.
Right. I'm just
hard,
kidding, obviously.
In my opinion.
I'm just kidding, obviously. And I say that, ladies and gentlemen, because I do want to situate. Strong leadership is really hard work, and it's really hard self-work. And that's really what we wanted to be able to convey a lot in this episode. And then I now want to take it to the world of culture and culture change and transformation and culture efficiency as well. You mentioned something really important that I completely agree with. I couldn't disagree with anything that you said in terms of the 10 pillars. But the idea of not being connected to your values is so problematic. And I've discovered in my leadership sessions, Carlos, that many people either really haven't identified clearly what their top values are, or they have gotten adrift from them. And so I like when you talk about how important, when you talk about strategies now to start to be able to bridge self-leadership with the kind of change and transformation that you want to see in your organization. One of the things that you talk about is the importance of aligning your personal values with a corporate purpose. And then, of course, using the self-governance from a model for sustainable change. So let's dive into that a little bit, because I think that will help our listeners and viewers bridge what we've been talking about here for the self-leadership into now how do I help affect change through myself and my team for culture and change.
I think from starters, either we want to continue with the culture and we'll find some deviation from that, or we want a new culture, right? And in, 27 years of work, professional work, working for other companies or working for myself, I don't think I found one single example where the culture is really stable and 100% has alignment with that. So the first thing is that getting to really know the values of the organization or the culture of the organization, if these values are really real or they are, wishful thinking. Right? Sometimes they're just wishful thinking. Sometimes they're in the wall. They don't represent anything. So when I bring the self-leadership here, it's just like, what does that mean to you when you have like a culture of, for example, teamwork? Because the culture is not something that survives by itself. If you remove every single human being from a company, the walls are not going to keep the culture. Of course, the context, the environment, the technology, the processes will support the culture. But the culture is made by people, how they interact, how they communicate, how they show up in the work. If they put love or not in what they are doing, if they're present or not. That to me, it's in the very raw terms, that's what culture is. It's just like how people interact with things that are spoken, things that are silently done. So when I start checking, and two major scenarios were when I do with an executive or a leader, and the value system in some way is disconnected. It's just like, what does that mean to you that you have a values not being respected by the company or vice versa? And give me specific examples. Is this acceptable to you? Do you want to continue to work in this company? Do you want to grow in this company? How can you merge your set of values with the values from the company? How you can start adapting? Or if, for example, if you work in a company that's so results focused and you just love celebration, how can you use celebration as a byproduct of the things happen, even if people don't tend to celebrate a lot? This was a weird example. I'm just thinking out loud here. And the other side is when I work directly with business owners and they want different results. So I start working with the vision, again, being intentional. What is the intention? Where do you want to go? Where you want to be? How you're going to be remembered? What's results that you want in 2030, for example, if you're looking at a 5-year. And then when it gets to the culture, it's just, okay, does your current culture support this journey? Are you going to be in the top of the mountain with this culture? I say no. So what's the new culture? So we do the entire, review and rewiring and rewriting of the cultural code, the purpose, mission, vision, and values. And values, in my experience, is the most tangible things, even that they seem like fluffy. They are the most tangible things in day-to-day operations, because mission, vision, and purpose is something that is just, it's in the time. But values, you can see them in action right away. So one work we do is just how we detail these values, like integrity, as specific examples and counter examples per type of work or per division. And then, of course, the business owners or the executives or leaders, they have to be the champions of the values. They have to give example every single day. And the reason sometimes they don't lead their values is because they have internal misalignment.
Yeah.
And that's when we go back to the self-leadership. It's just, at the end of the day, it tends to be the mirror. Oh, I'm not doing this. And why I'm not doing it. And then you go.
Mm-hmm. So beautiful, Carlos. I want to put a little small bow on what you just said there and call back to a previous episode that we had with Dr. Carlos Hoyos in Barcelona, Spain. Carlos has a whole practice, and he taught that, and we now use this in Gusto now as well, where once we have determined the purpose of the organization, we can actually measure the experience of that using 3 questions. And that's really how the leaders are living it, how is it showing up in the everyday behaviors of your colleagues, and how do your personal values align with the purpose? Therefore, it activates you. And when you do that, I think it's really, really powerful. Now you have a way to leverage and operationalize your purpose in relation to your values, your mission, your vision, and your purpose statement. So I really applaud the work that you're doing, and you've made it so accessible for us today, Carlos. And I think that we've opened some hearts and minds today. I hope listeners and viewers will reach out to you. I'm going to give them how to do that in just a second, but let me give you an opportunity to close the conversation as you like, say in about 30 seconds. What would you like to leave listeners and viewers with around the world?
There's a song from Beatles that I love.
Can you sing it?
And it's called, I can, but I won't sing it here.
Okay.
All you need is love. But not the mushy love. It's like unconditional love, like parenthood love. If you treat the clients with the love that you have, like as a parent, not in the demonstrations as a parent, but you want the best for this human being. You want the best for this company. You want the best for the team. That's, to me, it's unconditional love. And sometimes you're going to be rejected in this process. Sometimes people are not going to like you. But if you're very clear in what you're doing and you show that this is for the best, you're going to do it. So to me, it's just loving yourself and loving people, every single human being that you meet. And that, to me, are the basis for self-leadership and for leadership and for governance. Because if you really love people and companies, you're not going to be doing a mediocre work. You're going to do the act of love. That's going to be the work of your life every single time.
Beleza. Carlos, it has been a great pleasure to have you on Working on Purpose. Obrigada por estar aquí and working on purpose. Un placer. Listeners and viewers, you are going to want to learn more about Carlos and the work that he does. You can check out 2 websites. He is also on LinkedIn as well, but let me send you first to his personal site. It's Carlos Hoyos. So Carlos, C-A-R-L-O-S. Hoyos is H-O-Y-O-S. So carloshoyos.com. His business leadership is eliteleaderinstitute.com. eliteleaderinstitute.com. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch a via recorded podcast wherever you get your podcast. We will see you next week for another nurturing and inspiring conversation featuring another thought leader. And remember that work is one of the best adventures and means of realizing our potential and making the impact we crave, and can give us the opportunity to do business in a way that betters the world. So let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Alise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.